Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of our ongoing series, Is This Pilot Actually Good? Where we look at a show, we ask the question, hopefully we answer the question, and we have a lot of fun that is along the way. But this video is going to be about, I think, a show that will go down as one of the greatest shows of all time. Breaking Bad. It is an iconic series with a really, really good pilot, an interesting journey sort of behind it as well, and we'll talk through everything of what I think. I don't think we need to go through this entire video before answering, is this pilot actually good?
Oh, this is one of the best pilots ever made.
It is really, really great, and just rewatching it, it's almost even better than it is when you watch it for the first time, because you sort of see all the bones to where it eventually goes on Breaking Bad, and it all makes sense. It's so refreshing to have a show where it feels like everything is actually thought through from start to finish.
Yeah, full disclosure, I've seen the whole series from start to finish 3 times.
Yeah, I have not seen the whole series start to finish 3 times, but I have seen the whole series start to finish. Yeah. So I think we'll have a lot to contribute here. Before we dive in, though, if you guys do like this video, give us a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other updates that we've got coming up.
Okay, so I like to start these with something very simple, which is just the theme song, opening credits. Does this make sense for this show? Did they do a good job? Do they have a good theme song? Let's start with that.
It's not... Okay, this is the thing. We've talked about a lot of shows so far in this series. We've discussed Friends, Game of Thrones, The Big Bang Theory. Like, all these shows have really iconic theme songs.
They do.
Breaking Bad does not actually have a theme song so much as just some weird noises and some green haze. It lasts for about a few seconds.
Yeah, and I mean, with a show like this, having something that's a little more sort of like a musical interlude type feeling of a song than like a really catchy theme song makes sense for this show. Looking back at it, now that I know what the show is about, having sort of the pictures of the periodic table and then just that little poof of smoke, I really liked it. It makes a lot of sense because even though, yeah, this show is about drugs and crime and family and all these other things, the thread of science it plays out in the pilot, and it is throughout this series. It plays a huge role in this.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say this is my top 5, top 10 opening themes of all time or anything, but I think it does a good job of at least representing the show, encapsulating what it's about, and because this is a show that's so much about the characters, and it's dark, and it's gritty, you don't want to spend a minute every episode with the theme song. You just kind of want to get in there and get into the nitty-gritty of it all.
Yeah, kind of like Lost,
yeah,
which has no theme song, really. But, I mean, it's that same sort of feeling. You know what you're getting into, and you just want to get into it.
Lost has, like, one noise, and that is the entire theme song for that show. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, they're all going to come after us now for imitating the Lost theme song. So that is it's a really good jumping off point. The entire pilot, I feel like it is so unbelievably strong, but it's also so interesting to sort of look back at the history of it. And this was not a show that got off the ground really easily. It had a lot of misses. There were a lot of people who weren't super interested in it right away. They really had to fight to get Bryan Cranston as the lead, and that boggles my mind now that you wouldn't want Bryan Cranston, but it was a thing.
Yeah, and in some ways, I would kind of get it. I mean, Malcolm in the Middle, big show. He was so funny on that show. But that's what everybody knows him for. And it's kind of difficult sometimes when you're an iconic character on another TV show to then move into something else. This is sort of, we talked a little bit about this in our Big Bang Theory pilot discussion as well. You know, you have Johnny Galecki, who was a huge star on Roseanne, which was a very different role for him. And then he goes into the Big Bang Theory, and it was a little bit difficult to kind of get around it. He ended up being a really great casting, but at the same time, at first it was like, is that the right fit or not?
And It always turns out that these people who cast these shows know more than a lot of us sitting back and talking about them, where they got it right with Johnny Galecki. They obviously get it unbelievably right for Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
And I do think in the early going, one of the reasons why they didn't want to cast Bryan Cranston was this was not a show set up to get great ratings or be a big success immediately. It really takes Emmys, quality, Netflix, like all this stuff to really turn Breaking Bad into those final seasons where it was just like this runaway ratings freight train just destroying everything in its path.
Yeah, it did. This wasn't necessarily a pilot that everybody went straight into, because if you hear what the plot of it is, which they did a great job sort of laying out what this is. You've got this chemistry teacher who finds out he's got an inoperable cancer and now he's in the drug trade. That's not for everybody, and it is for a smaller audience. But when you get sort of past just those things and you really get into the show and see all the different dynamics of the show, it is about a lot more than that. And that's why the success of the show really depended on word of mouth. And it wasn't just, oh, I watched this pilot, now I want to watch more. It was, you need somebody to kind of push you to get into it if that is not your type of scene.
Let's just start with the very opening of the pilot, because this is incredible. The first thing we see, pants. It's just sort of like, okay, the more I even get into this, I just sort of think, couldn't Walt have gone to like a thrift shop and bought like some burner clothes or something? No, you guys wanted him in the tighty whities doing all this stuff. It is incredibly memorable. And just for that first minute alone, where you see this man in his underwear in the desert, Winnebago, pointing a gun, and you're just like, what have I gotten myself into here?
Yeah, they really wanted to raise the stakes. You've got Walter in his underwear, you've got the guns, you've got the Winnebago, you've got all these drugs, you've got two guys rolling around the back. Could they be dead? Nobody knows. They're rolling around in money. I mean, it's such a crazy first scene that if you're looking for action, then you know right away what the show is going to give you.
I'm not for every show sort of opening with a flash forward. I think this can be kind of a cheap device, but for Breaking Bad, a show with that kind of title, they needed to do something like this before they introduced you to mundane Walter White, because I think you watch 10 minutes of mundane Walter White and you think, oh, this guy is not anywhere near as interesting as underwear Winnebago Walter White, who we meet down the road.
Yeah, I mean, that opening scene right away catches you because you want to know, how did this guy end up in this situation? I need to know. And that's what you need, is that hook. And this show does it right away.
We're going to get into some big picture analysis on Breaking Bad pretty fast here, because the emotion that honestly surprised me the most watching this again is how sad I felt in a lot of ways, because Walt has this birthday party scene, and I know that he gets kind of demeaned at various points in it by Hank, but I was still sort of sitting here thinking about, this is a guy who's got a lot of people showing up to his birthday party.
Yeah, he does.
There's clearly a culture of love that has been built around him. People love the old Walter White on some level, and it just is this stark contrast from this guy who, has all this money and power, but season 5 Walter White, he's not getting that crowd at his birthday party.
No, he's completely alone. And that was one of the things that, knowing sort of how things go later on for him, seeing the decisions that he made in this and seeing why he ended up completely alone, it all makes sense, and it's all in this pilot. One of the things that I actually wanted to touch on is Skyler, because she's a character that a lot of people started getting really down on and really angry about as the series was going on, that she should have ended up being more understanding of what Walt was doing, or be by his side, for better, for worse. And when I watched this pilot, like rewatched it knowing what's going to come up for them and how badly their marriage falls apart. I've seen a lot of people over the years blame Skyler for the downfall of their marriage, but this pilot, Walter ended his marriage in this pilot, which is crazy. When he finds out that he has this inoperable cancer, he makes the decision to not have the conversation with his wife, who's, the mother of his children, pregnant with another child, ready to build their family. And he makes the decision to exclude her from a huge life decision, 2 of them. Not only that he has this cancer, which is a huge life change, he's decided to move into crime, which is also a huge life change. He didn't actually ever give her the opportunity for the 2 of them to have the conversation to see if there was another way. And that's because Walter didn't want another way. He wanted the power, which is what we learn later on. We see in this pilot all this disrespect that's going on and him feeling small, from his students to the boss at the second job, to even what Hank is doing at the birthday party, kind of putting him down. This isn't about money, and it never was about money. So for all the Skyler haters out there, it really is laid out in this episode that Walt is the person that decided to move away from this marriage. It was crazy. I mean, you see her in this marriage of all the things that she's actually doing to try to keep the family together, including selling stuff on eBay to make the ends meet, to do what she can. She's aware that they have money problems.
Skyler is such a complicated character. I think in the pilot, it's easy to sort of see and understand her point of view and to definitely feel something for her when you know how the show progresses. And I think it's still easy at the end of Breaking Bad to feel a lot of sympathy for Skyler. I think the writers occasionally throughout Breaking Bad drop the ball when it comes to how they present Skyler, some of the storylines they give her. I feel like they could have done more with her than they did throughout the multiple seasons. But I think she is presented really, really well. She's a defined character in the pilot with a very clear point of view. And with Walt, you sort of sense in the early going, okay, this is why this man is so angry. Can we talk about how well the name Chad ages as just like a jerk? Because lo and behold, the jerk in the class, his name is Chad, and then he shows up at the car wash and he's still being a Chad. Get out of here! I think after this episode, if there's any one person who deserved the danger, it was probably Chad.
Probably. But one of the things that I did like that they laid out in this episode was the love that was around him and the support of his immediate family. You see the relationship he has with his son. It's really strong. You see the relationship he has with Skyler, putting together this huge birthday party for him, to the smallest things of even just putting the 50 in the bacon on his plate. Yeah. There's a lot of love in his family for him, which is why when he makes his decision to break bad, not talk to his family about it, we can see that this is way deeper in the pilot from all the disrespect that's coming together, that this is what it's actually about. The show is so brilliant in putting that together. They made sure you knew it really wasn't about the money.
This is going to be a really crazy question, but I need to ask it. Had Chad not been such a jerk, and I'm not just talking about Chad, but had Chad not been a jerk, had Walt's boss at the car wash, had he been not such a jerk, like had these little individual moments not happen, and maybe Walt's just had a pretty good week before he goes in and gets this diagnosis, does the show change? Does he tell Skyler in that moment what he's going through, or how much of him just hiding it has to do with his rage in that moment?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good question, but I feel like the pilot did lay out that this wasn't a one-time occurrence. This happens to him really often. It didn't feel to me like a one-off bad day. It feels kind of like this was like a well, this is the norm. This is what happens to me. I mean, even watching Chad drag that chair, Walter just had this look on his face like, all right, so this is normal today because this was normal yesterday. This is going to be normal tomorrow for me. And the same sort of thing at the car wash. Yep, I'm embarrassed. This is going to be the way it is always.
The way that I sort of view Breaking Bad now is that it's sort of a show about a guy who always had within him this ability to try to find a way to seize power and get back at all those who have wronged him, but he never had approval from society to do that, and he always had some sort of compass or way to just keep moving forward. But when he finds out that his life is in jeopardy, that it's almost about to end, and this is all he has taken, and this is what society has given him, well, it is such a clearly defined moment of, okay, this is where I'm going to be bad now, and it makes so much sense, and it brings you to so many other just cool, interesting moments in this episode.
Yeah, the moment that really I saw the flip of power where he had all the power and it was a huge foreshadowing for the future was when he, of course, saw Jesse climbing out the window, later goes to his house. He's made the decision that he wants to do this now. And he says to Jesse, you've got two choices. And they're both in my power. Either you're going to work with me or I'm going to turn you in. And that was the moment that I was kind of like, so this is where Walt wants to be. Power in one hand, power in another hand. Which hand are you going to choose? Because they both are going to be mine.
And I think it's probably no coincidence that the person he sort of ends up seeking out for all of this is Jesse, a former student, someone he already has had some position of power over in the past, where even if Walt is sort of this loser in the eyes of a lot of people, he has still had a position of authority over Jesse before. And he also, you look at Jesse, he is a junkie, he is ridiculous, he is a mess. This is not someone who is really getting his life together, and Jesse is so clearly defined in this pilot of who he is. He's not always altogether likable, and he's crass, and he's offensive, and all of these other things, but that is sort of where a character like Jesse would be.
Yeah, he absolutely would be like this. And, looking back at it, I can, of course, see that some people might be offended by some of the things he's saying, and you're supposed to be. He is a character that is offensive. He is a character who's a criminal. This is the society that he is living in. So this completely makes sense for him, and he sold me on it.
The funniest thing to me about Jesse is we see Jesse in the pilot, and then when we get to sort of later on in Breaking Bad, we're all just like, come on, Jesse, get away from Walt, you can be the hero now. And it's sort of like, yeah, in the pilot, you are this criminal who's really doing more bad things than almost anyone else in early going, and you're just a mess. But
and it's interesting, too, because as you go through the series, people are really rooting for Walt. And when you see him in the pilot...
yeah.
He's not a good person here either. Yes, he is going through some stuff. Obviously, he's going through the cancer thing, and that is terrible. He is getting disrespect. That is terrible. He is also doing some really terrible things right away. He is doing bad things. So it's kind of interesting to follow both of these characters, two guys who are kind of terrible from the get-go, but we become so invested in them, and that's what this show does so well, is to give us two people who are pretty bad and make us care about them so much.
And it's an interesting thing psychologically to sort of get into, the psychology of why we like to watch anti-heroes and people who are doing bad things, and I think a part of it is fascination as to what could cause these people sort of on the fringe of society to want to do things like this. Maybe it's just we want to experience a crazy story. I don't think it can be lost that Breaking Bad and Mad Men, which is kind of the other flagship AMC scripted show, they premiere at kind of a similar time, and Don Draper may not be Walter White, but they both are these very immoral characters at times who do these bad things, and yet you're so on board with the journey because the characters are so good that you sort of at times almost want to turn off the part of your brain that's like, yeah, this person is a criminal and he's trying to kill people, but yet I can't wait to see what he does next.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's always been really interesting about the Skyler character and how angry people got about her not supporting him. I mean, I would ask any of you, if your partner came home and you found out that this was going on behind your back, how many people would be like, yeah, I'm on board. That's what I signed up for when I said, for better or for worse, to be with someone who's a criminal. And I think the answer is no. Nobody's going to put up with that. Like, why would anybody put up with that? And another thing that this pilot did really beautifully is, and it could have gone another way and it didn't, is it took a smaller amount of time to get us to where Walter is Breaking Bad. And the small amount of time that they took to lay out, he's a chemistry teacher, he's got this illness that he thinks is terminal, he's living a very sort of normal life. They didn't need any more time than that to tell us what was going on with him and to make us buy into that. And a lot of other shows, they may have taken a couple episodes of us going through Walter White working at the car wash, where it's like, all right, we get it. Like, what else is happening here?
The funny thing is that when I first watched this pilot, my initial reaction is, okay, did we rush a lot of this a little bit too fast? And I think a part of this is I'm someone who has been really watching a lot of Better Call Saul, and I feel like sometimes a full season of Better Call Saul will maybe tell about the same amount of story as the pilot for Breaking Bad. Better Call Saul can be really slowly paced sometimes, but I think it is important that they laid out that much groundwork for Walt's story right away. Because Better Call Saul, you know who Saul Goodman is going into it. Here you don't. You have to actually get to know him. You got to get to know some of the people in his life. And while it was a little jarring for me at first watching it back, I do appreciate it, and I think this was one of the reasons why people got hooked on Breaking Bad so easily.
So the other thing that I loved about this pilot that they threaded throughout the show was the element of science. I love that he's a chemistry teacher, and because he is, and he's not just a chemistry teacher, he is passionate about chemistry. They show it right away in the pilot, and it threads throughout the entire series. He gives this really great sort of speech to his class where he's talking about chemistry and why it's so fascinating, and the idea of things being combustible and that everything is forever changing, which of course is a metaphor for the whole show, and for him, and changing throughout the whole show. It was just, you've got this, then you've got him, of course, cooking, which is all chemistry as well. You've got him even getting away from Crazy 8 and Emilio using chemistry. Like, it's just, I really, really like that they, even though he's Breaking Bad, they're keeping that part of him, something he's super passionate about, moving forward through the whole thing. Like, even what he's doing, he's so, like, proud of the chemistry of how he's getting his results through the whole show.
Walt feels a lot to me at times like evil science MacGyver, where he's able to sort of make something out of very, very little. Hey, let's go in this Winnebago to the desert and I will make the most perfect material that you have ever possibly seen.
Yep.
Look at the crystals. Look how my favorite part in all of this is, I think it was when Jesse calls Walt an Iron Chef over what he's able to ultimately produce. How impressed Jesse was with the contribution, but the science, I think, is really, really good. Mm-hmm. I think some of the characters, even the supporting people, they're clearly defined. They age really well. Walt Jr., very, very fun.
I love Walt Jr. in this series, and I know we're just talking about the pilot, and he was great in the pilot too, but I'm just going to say that speech that he gave Walter when he told Walter off at the end of this series was like one of the best moments of the show. I was like, this is a proper reaction. This is so good. That he is such a good actor. He really killed this role, and he was great in the pilot. Yeah. That back and forth between him and his dad and everything that was happening when he was trying on the jeans and, you know, Walt coming in and kicking that guy down. I mean, it was all just their relationship is really defined in this pilot.
And I think their relationship's really well done. I think Hank is introduced really well, where he is in law enforcement, so you want to think he's one of the good guys, and he is trying to put a lot of bad guys away, but he's also obnoxious, and he's a heel. He's not someone you really want to root for, and
No.
that's a good establishment of sort of the relationship and eventually the rivalry that sort of comes up between Hank and Walt later on in the series. It kind of makes you lean towards a particular side of it even more. And then there's Marie, and I will say this is probably my one critique of the pilot. I don't think they had any idea what to do with Marie in the pilot.
I absolutely agree. I mean, there was obviously tension between the two sisters. That's something I've definitely seen before with sisters in life on TV.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they did do a good job at least showing a real relationship between sisters and sort of that little back and forth that does go on between sisters in particular. But yeah, they really didn't seem to know what they were going to do with her just yet. But that's okay. I mean, you know, for everything else that stuck the landing in this pilot, to have just one or two small things, that's pretty good.
I am really satisfied after watching Breaking Bad and the pilot again. I think it holds up extremely well. I think it's fun at times, dramatic, sad, crazy.
Yeah, and one of the things I like to ask in these videos is basically, if you only watch the pilot and you didn't have all the Breaking Bad fans being like, oh, you need to watch the show, you need to watch the show, it's so good, it's so good. If you only watch the pilot, would you watch the next episode? And for me, the answer is yes, and I did. I watched the pilot and I immediately went into the next episode.
Yeah, and I'm not someone who saw Breaking Bad from the get-go, so I wasn't able to sort of see it without a lot of people telling me to, but it's still a situation where I think, you know, the majority of people, if you're into this sort of show, and it is specific in that way, I think you're going to want to keep watching, because it is just so compelling and so well done, and it really does map out everything else. And as someone who has watched all Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and I have all these other characters sort of in my memory bank, it's like, the show is so good here. I didn't miss people like a Saul Goodman, you know, like a Gus Fring, like all these other characters who we're gonna meet.
Mike,
yeah, all these people I love, but it's just the start of it is so good and still worth watching. And if you have not watched Breaking Bad yet,
absolutely check this show out. It's so good.
Yeah, what are you waiting for? All right, well, we'll wrap this up. I think, yes, the pilot is actually good.
The pilot is actually really good.
It is one of the best pilots ever. I think we're in agreement on that. But what did you guys think about the Breaking Bad pilot when you first saw it? Let us know in the comments. And if you do like this video, give us a like, subscribe, and you can support us further by checking the link in the description to the store. And we'll see you here next time.